right, so today we're going to start something new because we just finished our previous series. And it's going to be a really interesting study. We're going to solve a mystery. So I hope everybody's ready to solve a mystery. We're going to do what I call the search for the doctrine of grace. Now, a lot of people will say, Rabbi, you don't talk about grace very much. Well, we're going to solve that this time. We're going to talk about it today and probably for the next week or two. And so we're going to get into this thing called the search for the doctrine of grace. Now, the search for the doctrine of grace is a teaching that I did probably in 2000 or 2001 originally, and it was a one-part teaching, but as you are all very familiar, anything that I did was a one-part teaching years ago turns into 12 parts now, so we'll see where this goes. But this is a mystery that we're going to solve and we're going to dig into, and what we're going to do is we're going to go through this study and examine this idea of the doctrine of grace. Because as I'm sure you're all familiar, one of the things that you're always dealing with as a person who's quote-unquote come out of her, my people, is this whole idea of grace versus the law, and this idea that we're under grace now. And so my thought is about grace as a doctrine. Is grace really a doctrine, and where did it come from? And when did it become the all-important doctrine of the church, so to speak? And so we're going to look for, from Scripture, this idea of grace. Okay, and so the word grace, in the Greek, it comes from the word charis. Okay, so in the New Testament, in the Brit HaKadashah, it's the word charis, and it appears in the Brit Hadashah 156 times. Okay, so you may be surprised to say that maybe that's a large number to you, maybe it's a small number to you, for considering how much people talk about grace. But it only appears there 156 times. And what you'll find very interesting is that it appears in, and I'm going to kind of go through this really kind of to give you where these verses are. It appears in Matthew 0 times. Mark doesn't mention it once. Okay. The book of Luke has it 8 times. Yochanan, Second Yochanan, and Revelation, which are the books of John that he wrote, have it 7 times. James or Yaakov only twice. And 1st and 2nd Peter 12 times, Yehuda once, the book of Jude once, and then in Paul's writings, in his letters 102 times, in the book of Acts 16, in the book of Hebrews 8. So you can see where this balance is, that this whole thing is coming out of some sort of understanding or misunderstanding of something Shaul talked about. Because really hardly anybody else talked about it. Because out of 156, 102 were in Paul's letters, and if you include Acts and Hebrews, you can add another 24 to that. So 126 out of 156, only 30 other times has it appeared by anybody else. Now, this is such an important doctrine. How many times do you think Messiah talked about it? How many times do you think Messiah mentions grace? Well, he mentions it only 4 times. Let that settle in for a second in your brain. Mashiach only mentions it 4 times, and all of them are in Luke. So we don't even have a second witness to Messiah. He doesn't say it in Matthew or Mark or John. Only in Luke does Messiah mention grace. And when you see the verses, when we get to them, and we read the verses where Messiah uses the word grace, you'll see that it has absolutely nothing to do with a doctrine. Okay, it has nothing to do with a doctrine or doctrinal understanding. Okay, so Yeshua is quoted using it only 4 times, and it's 3 times in Luke chapter 6 and 1 time in Luke chapter 17. That's it, 4 times. Now, the Hebrew word translated grace or favor is the word chen. It's chet nun, or nun sofit really is the way to pronounce that properly. Chen. And that word chen appears in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament scriptures, in the Tanakh, 69 times, which actually is not bad considering most Christians don't think grace existed at all before Messiah walked on the earth. And so here we have 69 references, and it's not in very many books. 14 in Genesis, 9 in Exodus, 3 times in the book of Numbers, once in Deuteronomy, once in Judges, 6 times in 1 Samuel. 2 Samuel has 3, 1 Kings 1. Jeremiah once, Nahum once, Zechariah 3 times, Psalms 2 times, Proverbs 13 times, Ruth 3 times, Ecclesiastes twice, and the book of Esther 6 times. But if you notice as I went through this, let's see, Leviticus has 0. You have Isaiah, You have, let's see, we've got Ezekiel. You've got all kinds of other big name people, don't seem to mention it at all. So it's interesting who mentions it and who doesn't, because out of all of the, 66 books of the Scriptures, we've only got a very small handful of books that even mention grace, or even deal with grace. So let's dig into this a little bit more. The Greek word charis means graciousness in manner or act. Graciousness in manner or act. The Hebrew word chen means graciousness, subjectively means kindness or favor. Favor. And so we're going to go and look at what Webster has to say about it so we understand what these words now in English mean. Grace means goodwill, favor, a delay granted for the payment of an obligation. Graciousness means having or showing kindness, courtesy, charm, being compassionate. And favor means friendly regard, approval, to be in good standing with. And we're going to see that's probably the primary use of the word is favor. Of course, you have a lot of mainstream guys love to talk about how they're walking in favor. I can't help but throw the southern accent in when I say that. I don't know why. I'm just walking in favor. And I don't think they understand what it means and what it's all about. This is, again, one of those situations where we're dealing with what I call Christianese. And what Christianese simply means is a word or a phrase or a term or an idea that has lost its original meaning because of it being filtered through the Christianized system, and now it's no longer even resembling what it originally started out to be. So there are words that we have trouble using today because they're now quote-unquote Christianese. Like when I say something is holy, most people don't know what that means because Christianese has turned it into a meaningless word. We don't know what holy means. It's very ambiguous, very subjective to people's opinions, right? Holy. Salvation or being saved is one of those words. There's lots of phrases that we have that are very hard to understand in English because the Christian usage of it for so long, for 2,000 years, has done damage to the meaning so that it doesn't really mean what it originally did. The same is going to be about grace. Grace is one of those words that's going to be Christianized or Christianized, and it's going to make it really tough for us to understand it. Now, what I want to do in going through this, I'm trying to make a case. Think of this as like going to court. I'm going to be the attorney I'm defending this idea. I'm going to be making a case to you guys, the jurors. And as I'm making this case, and in order to make this case, I want to cover and read every single verse with the word grace. So that there isn't anybody going to say, oh, well, yeah, well, great, but you left out this verse, and this verse settles everything. So we're going to read all 227 of them. Okay? Now, it's going to take a little while. Now, look, we went through 613 commandments. There's only a third of that. Okay? But I think it's important. I think it's critical that we go through all 156 New Testament and all 69 Old Testament so that we have the clarity and the ability to make an argument and discussion with people about what grace really is and what it isn't. Does that make sense? Okay, now, as we're going through this, we're going to take a similar approach that we did during the Heart of the Matter series, which means we may read a whole chapter to understand one verse in the chapter that was talking about grace. We may read only 3 or 4 verses related to it, so we're going to try and make sure our context is clear, that we have no doubt what the context and framework is, because we have to know when that word is used, what other things are being linked to it. Because we're taught in Christianese, and maybe I'm wrong because I was never in the mainstream church, but just tell me if I'm wrong, that grace is unmerited pardon, unmerited something, okay? Unmerited reward, unmerited something. And so is that really what it means scripturally, or is that all that it means scripturally? And that's what we want to get into, okay? And so the way we're going to do this is what I believe is the only correct way to do anything scripturally, is we're going to go and establish the Tanakh Foundation first. Because I believe if you read the scriptures in the right order, you will understand it a lot better. In other words, if you were to read the first 5 books, which is the Torah, from Genesis through Deuteronomy, then read the prophets, then read the writings, which is going to be things like, Psalms, Proverbs, etc. And then you go and read Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, etc., which is the Gospels. And then from there you go and read the letters of the apostles, which would be John and James and Peter. And then after reading all of that stuff, then you read Paul, things that might make a little bit of a difference. Am I making sense? You filter things correctly if you read them in the right order, because then you've already understand foundationally what has already been established. And so if Paul seems to be saying something that looks a little bit afield, or a little bit out in left field, you'll actually see that it looks a little bit out in left field, and maybe you have to kind of rearrange what you may be thinking he's trying to say. Because if Christians will come to you and say, well, Paul says the law was nailed to the cross. Well, if you already have the 4,000 years of history prior to that kind of in your head, knowing how important the law was to the Creator, you would know that that would be impossible. Or when a Christian tries to convince you that doing the law is burdensome, horrible, and mean, and ugly, and nasty, but you've already read everything in the right order, you'd realize that it's a blessing, it's to keep you safe, it's the thing that's transforming you from what you are into what He is, etc. You understand what I'm saying? If you read these things in the right order. So we're going to do the same thing now. Now, it's going to take a while to get to Paul's writings, but we're going to do it in the order I just said, because it's Paul's writings that we need to understand correctly. Am I attacking Paul? No. Am I going to say that we are, and I don't mean we necessarily, all of us, because a lot of you maybe have this kind of already handled, but the people you debate about grace with, I believe, don't understand what Paul was talking about. But we have to understand what he was talking about after we understand from Scripture what the base is. Because Paul, you have to remember, had all of this stuff memorized. To be a student of Gamaliel, he would have had to have memorized the Tanakh. He would have had such a working knowledge of it way beyond any of us. So whenever he said it already understanding the framework of the foundation. Only thing is, the average person reading it doesn't spend any time left of Matthew, so they don't know what's going on from the Tanakh anyway. They're just reading Ephesians and Philippians and Colossians and blah, 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 blah. And if you're going to base your whole theology on letters written by Paul to his congregations about personal issues or congregational issues they specifically were having, you're going to maybe get in trouble trying to build your theology that way. Because if somebody tried to build a theology based on decisions I've made in this congregation that were personal to this congregation, they would probably get messed up as well. Not because I've made bad decisions, just because sometimes a decision had to be made that was for you guys. It doesn't necessarily mean it's for everybody else. And so the same thing with Paul. He was dealing with a specific situation in a particular congregation, in a particular time frame, in a particular country. And so he had to make certain decisions based on all of that. That doesn't necessarily mean that we could just right away know how to apply it to ourselves. And so we're going to try to get this foundation laid out. And so we're going to begin at the beginning, which is in Genesis. And we're going to look at the very first use of the word in Bereshit in Genesis chapter 6 and in verse 8. Genesis chapter 6 and in verse 8. Now, by the way, there is, in Hebraic understanding, according to the rabbis, and I know right as soon as I said that, I shut half of you off. Oh, meaning the rabbis said something? Okay, I'm not listening anymore. Okay, but according to the rabbis, according to the learned scholars, the sages, there's a thing called the law of first usage. And the law of first usage basically says that if you really want to understand what a word means and what we're supposed to learn about it, go and see how it was used the first time. Because that's going to give you a key foundation about that idea if you look at the first place it occurs. It's called the law of first usage. You can look it up on, I'm sure if you put it in Google, it'll come up with some of the rabbis and where this came from. And I think it's an important tool for us to understand this law of first usage. So here we're going to go to look at the very first usage of the word chen, or favor. And in the Tanakh, especially in the Scriptures version that we're using, a lot of us are using, the word is going to be translated almost always as favor. As favor. But we're going to examine, based on the definitions I read, what sort of favor this is. So in Bereshit chapter 6, and in verse 8, it says, "And Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh." Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh. Now keep this in mind. Almost all the verses that we're going to read in the Tanakh are going to have this idea of finding favor in the eyes of. The word chen, the word grace, is used in this phrase, finding favor in the eyes of. And I believe that is going to be the core understanding of what grace is. That grace comes because you found favor in the eyes of. And now we're going to look at what it means or how you find favor in the eyes of. So let's go and look at why did Noah find favor in the eyes of Yahweh? Because in verse 8 it says, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh." Well, let's go back and, actually let's jump to verse 1 of chapter 7 first. In chapter 7 and verse 1 it says, And Yahweh said to Noah, Come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. So Noah was righteous before Yahweh. Before Yahweh, that means in his eyes. He did it in the sight of Yahweh. He did what? He did righteousness. We're going to do a teaching on that soon, defining and showing, just like we're doing here for grace, we're going to do the same thing with righteousness and show that righteousness is something you do. It's not something that just gets accorded to you because somebody else did it, because we have that idea that, well, Yeshua's righteousness gets imputed to us, and so that's what we need is his imputed righteousness. Well, the answer to that is absolutely, but only after you've already gotten your own righteousness to where it can get you. And we've done that whole vision and story and explained kind of the metaphor of what that looked like. Remember, you're walking on the path to the kingdom, and it's a door at the end of the path is the door to the kingdom. Well, it's your righteousness that gets you down the path to the door. It's his righteousness that gets imputed to you so that you can unlock the door. Follow that. I don't want to get into the whole story. We've done it a lot of times on other teachings. But just follow that idea. You walking, that's your halakha, your walk. You're walking in the ways of Yahweh, walk in all of his ways. It's your righteousness that gets you to the door. But you still need his righteousness accorded to you or given so that you could claim that righteousness to get through the door. But that doesn't happen till you get to the door. Okay. So here it is that Noah is righteous. He was seen to be righteous, as it says, because I have seen that you are righteous. He saw, it was in his eyes, he saw the righteousness. Now go back to chapter 6 and read verse 5. It says, Yahweh saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was on only evil continually. And Yahweh was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he grieved in his heart. And Yahweh said, I'm going to wipe off man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping creature, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. So let's understand the context of what's going on here. Yahweh is looking out on the earth, and man is doing evil continually. Let's remember the definition of evil. Anything that goes against the commandments of Yahweh is evil. So they were doing things that went against the teachings and instructions of Yahweh continually. And then there was this one man, though, amongst all of them, who was not doing evil. He was doing righteousness. And so it says that Noah found favor, found grace, found chen in the eyes of Yahweh. So why did he find favor or grace? Because he was doing righteousness. So it's not so much it was unmerited. It was absolutely merited. He found favor in Yahweh's eyes because he merited that favor because he was obedient, because he did righteousness. So in the first time we find this idea of favor or grace, we find it here. It's a merited favor. This is a merited favor. I'm not saying there's no such thing as unmerited favor. We're going to see that there absolutely is, but we have to see how it plays out. It's a much more full definition that we're going to need by the time we get to the Brit Hadashah, to the New Testament. Understand? Let's continue. Let's go to chapter 18. Let's go to chapter 18. We're going to stay in Genesis here for a whole bunch of verses. Because remember, in our list, the book with the most grace, which, by the way, we'd probably need that in the beginning, wouldn't we, is in the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. 14 times it occurs. The second most is in Proverbs, in the book of wisdom. Wouldn't that be a place that we need to learn about grace and favor? So 27 of the 69 times are in two books. And so we're going to cover them now. We're in the 14 that are in Genesis. So now we're in chapter 18 and in verse 1. In chapter 18 and in verse 1. And Yahweh appeared to him, that's Abram, by the terebinth trees of Mamre, while he was sitting in the tent door at the heat of the day. And so he lifted his eyes and looked, and he saw three men standing opposite him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground and said, Yahweh, if I have found favor in your eyes, please do not pass your servant by. Please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. And let me bring a piece of bread and refresh your hearts and then go on, for this is why you have come to your servant. He's saying, so you came to your servant so that you could be served. So you could be refreshed. You came to your servant to be served. And so he said to him, do as you have said. So he said, if I have found favor, let me serve you. And he said, I'm going to tell you what I plan to do, too. I'm going to bring you water, and I'm going to bring you food, and I'm going to wash your feet. I'm going to do all these other things so that you can have rest. And he said, so he found favor because of what he said he would do. He said, if I have found favor, now, by the way, what's a good definition of favor here? If I have found to be in good standing with, or if I have found approval. You see what it's talking about here? To be found in good standing with or approval. That's what we're talking about. He's saying, look, if I have been found to be in good standing with you, if you approve of me, come and sit down and let me take care of you. Let me serve you. Let's go on and continue in chapter 19 and in verse 15. And when morning dawned, the messengers urged Lot. Now we're at the point where the messengers are trying to get Lot out of Sodom. And when morning dawned, the messengers urged Lot to hurry, saying, get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city. And while he loitered, the men took hold of his hand and his wife's hand, the hands of his 2 daughters, Yahweh having compassion on him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. In verse 17, it says that it came to be when they had been brought them outside, that he said, escape for your life, do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain, escape to the mountains, lest you be consumed. And Lot said to them, oh, no, Yahweh, look, please, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have increased your kindness, which you have shown me by saving my life, but I am unable to escape to the mountains, lest calamity overtake me and I die. Look, please, the city is near enough to flee to, and it is small. Please let me escape there. Is it not a small matter, and let my life be saved? And he said to him, look, I have favored you concerning this matter also, without overthrowing this city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I am not able to do any deed until you arrive there. So the name of the city was called Soar. Well, let's understand what's going on here with Lot. Okay? It says, Lot goes, it says, you have favor. He didn't even say, if I have found favor. He says, your servant has found favor in your eyes. You have increased your kindness. And earlier in verse 16, it said, Yahweh having compassion on him. And we see this playing through. And then he asks for more. He said, well, look, I don't want to go where you sent me. So now he's being disobedient to a certain degree. So really, the key part of this is when he says, look, he said, I am not able to do any deed until you arrive there. Why was he not able to do any deed until he arrived there? Because Yahweh had sent the messengers to take Lot out of there for whose sake? Abram's sake. So who's the one that was receiving favor, Lot or Abram? Abram. So Lot got favor because of the righteousness, because of the merit of Abram. Not because of anything that had to do with, or Abraham. I guess at this point he's Abraham. So, it had nothing to do with Lot's righteousness or Lot deserving this in any way. It was unmerited by Lot, but it was done for the sake of somebody else. Are we following that? Because otherwise, he would have been said, no, I told you just go and go up into the mountains, because Yahweh knows and sends the messengers to tell him. But see, Lot didn't want to go where he was told. He saw a city and said, well, the city's going to be much nicer to go into the city. Let's go over to that city. I don't want to live in the mountains. I don't want to escape there. And he said, all right, you've gotten favor here too. Why? Because I'm being told by my master, Yahweh, go ahead, let him go wherever he wants to go, that's fine. I'm doing this for the sake of Abraham. I'm not doing this for the sake of Lot. That's an important thought. Keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this understanding of grace, of favor. That in this case, the favor was really a favor, an approval, a compassion, a mercy done on the sake of a righteous one who was not necessarily the one receiving the blessing of it, but it was for Abraham's sake. I hope that makes sense. Let's continue now in chapter 30. Chapter 30. And that's going to be important as we see that, because some of the things that Yahweh does and that Yeshua does had nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them and what their plan is, but you get to be the beneficiary. Just like the promise made to Abraham, Lot got to be the beneficiary, even though he did not deserve it at all. You see what I'm saying? But he was brought out because of Abraham's sake. Let's continue in chapter 30 and verse 25. Chapter 30 and verse 25. And it came to be when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Yaakov said to Laban, send me on my way to go to my own place and to my land. Give my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you yourself know my service which I have done for you. And Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, in other words, if I have found approval, if I am in good standing with you, if I have found favor in your eyes, please stay, for I have diligently watched that Yahweh has blessed me for your sake. And he said, name me your wages, and I give it. So he said to him, you know how I have served you, and how your livestock has been with me. For a little while you had before for a little that you had before I came has increased greatly. And Yahweh has blessed you since my coming. But now, when I am to provide for my own, when am I to provide for my own houses too? And so he says, what do I give you? He says, give me not. Okay, so let's not get into the whole detail of what happened there with those guys, but let's understand that Laban says, if I found favor in your eyes, please stay. Now, realize this is him kind of begging and trying to spin things, because he's already, twisted things enough and taken advantage of Yaakov quite nicely. But he's trying to say and appeal to him and say, look, be compassionate, because part of grace is graciousness. He says, be compassionate on me, show kindness to me. If I found any kind of approval in your eyes, did I do anything that you approve of, that you could be willing to do something for me? And so that's, again, the use of this phrase. And notice that it's, once again, favor in your eyes. So far, every use of this word in chapter 6, chapter 18, chapter 19, chapter 30 has always had the idea of favor in your eyes. And we're going to see that continue as we go through. Let's go to chapter 32 and in verse 3. Chapter 32 and in verse 3. We're still in Bereshit in Genesis. And Yaakov sent messages before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the field of Edom. And he commanded him, saying, say this to my master Esau. Your servant Yaakov said this, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now, and I have bulls and donkeys, flocks and male and female servants, and I have sent to inform my master to find favor in your eyes. To find favor in your eyes. So he's doing something to try to appeal for what? Favor. What is favor? Compassion. He's looking for approval. Remember, his brother, as far as he knew, was looking to kill him. Because the last he saw Esau was trying to kill him. And so he's trying to appeal now for favor, for mercy, for grace, to be in good standing with and say, look, I'm seeking approval. I'm going to give you gifts. What can I do to make things right? And so he says, look, I have sojourned, I've done all these things, and I have sent to inform my master to find favor in your eyes. I'm looking to find out what can I do to get approval, to be in better standing with you, so that you don't want to kill me anymore. Go to chapter 33 and in verse 8. Chapter 33 and in verse 8. Then Esau said, what do you mean by all this company which I met? And he said, to find favor in the eyes of my master. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother, let what you have remain yours. So this is after all these gifts were sent ahead of time to Esau to try to appease him, to find approval, to find favor. And Esau's like, no, I've got plenty. I don't need your stuff. He said, let what you have remain yours. And Yaakov says, no, please, if I now found favor in your eyes, then receive my presents from my hand, because I've seen your face like seeing the face of Elohim, and you were pleased with me. He says, if I have now found favor in your eyes, then receive my presents, take my gifts. Continuing, he says, please take my blessing that is brought to you, because Elohim has favored me, and because I have all I need. And he urged him, and he took it. So he says, I have been favored. He said, Elohim has favored me. In other words, I have found approval in Elohim. I am found to be in good standing with Elohim. He has shown compassion on me. He has blessed me. He has provided for me, and I want to give to you. And he said, let us depart and go, and let me go before you. But he said to him, my master knows that the children are weak and the flocks are herds, and herds which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them hard, one day all the flocks should die. Please let my master go before his servant, and let me lead on slowly according to the pace of the livestock that go before me, and according to the pace of the children, until I come to my master in Seir. And Esau said, please let me leave with you some of my people who are with me. But he, this is Yaakov, said, why this? Let me find favor in your eyes, my master. And Esau returned that day and on his way. So this last time he says, look, let me find favor in your eyes. In other words, I'm looking for approval. I'm looking to be in good standing. I'm looking for you to trust me. Because he wanted to leave men behind because he didn't trust Yaakov. And probably, well, he shouldn't have, because Yaakov doesn't follow him. He goes the other way. Because Yaakov didn't trust Esau either. He expected that whenever they got where they were going to go, that there was going to be a problem. And so he goes a different direction. But see, again, the word is always used in the idea of finding favor. Here, Yaakov is wanting to find favor in Esau's eyes. Let's go to chapter 34 and in verse 8. The next chapter over, chapter 34 and in verse 8. But Hamor spoke with Yaakov, saying, my son Shechem's being longs for your daughter. Okay, so this is after the Dinah incident. And Hamor is Shechem's father, saying, my son Shechem's being longs for your daughter. Please give her to him for a wife. And intermarry with us, give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves, and dwell with us, and let the land be before you, and dwell and move about in it, and have possessions in it. And Shechem said to her father and her brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I give. He says, let me find approval. Let me be found to be in good standing. I know I did this thing to Dinah, but what can I do to appease that? What can I do so I can find approval, mercy, compassion, and be in good standing with you guys? I'm willing to do whatever. But again, the phrase is, let me find favor in your eyes. Ask of me a bride price and gift ever so high, and I give according to you, to what you say, but give me the girl for a wife. Okay, so we see that's going on here. Again, this idea of looking for favor. Now, was the favor merited? No. But he said, what can I do to merit it? So here's another example of something that has to do with this idea of chen, or grace, or favor. In this case, he wasn't receiving unmerited, kind of like Lot did. He was asking for something he had not merited, but that he was willing to do something or whatever it would take to merit it. Keep that kind of idea in your mind as we go through all these things. Here's an opportunity to see someone who realized he absolutely deserved death, if anything, but was willing to do whatever was necessary to restore approval and to be seen to be in good standing with by those who he had deserved a lot worse from. He said, I'm willing to do whatever you ask me to do. By the way, isn't that what we do when we go before the throne? When we get on our knees and we know that we've sinned and we know that we've messed up? Don't we say, Abba, whatever you tell me to do, I will do? Tell me what price there is to pay. What do I need to do? And of course, Abba says, there is no more price for you to pay. Yeshua did it already. You just need to turn around and stop doing what you're doing and just start doing what's right. And come back under that covering. Let's continue in chapter 39. Chapter 39. Here I was thinking I'd get through most of this today. We're not even going to probably get out of the book of Bereshit. Chapter 39, verses 1 through 4. And Yosef had been taken down to Mitzrayim, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, kept. So this is after already Yosef has been sold into slavery. He says, and Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, captain of the guard of Mitzrayim, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And it came to be that Yahweh was with Yosef, and he became a prosperous man, and was in the house of his master the Mitzrayite. And the master saw that Yahweh was with him, and that Yahweh made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Yosef found favor in Potiphar's eyes, it says in his eyes, and served him, and he appointed him over his house and gave into his hand all that he had. So here's another opportunity where someone found favor for what? For what he unmerited, or because he did something? Yosef did some works, and those works were prospered by Yahweh, and that brought him favor in the eyes of Potiphar. Because he saw that Yosef was favored by Yahweh. Now, he didn't just say that Potiphar realized, wow, this guy is great. Whatever he does brings me a lot of money. It brings me a lot more cattle. It brings me to prosper in my flocks and in my gardens and in my crops and everything. He said that he saw that Yahweh was with him, and that Yahweh made all that he did prosper. He actually saw that it was Yahweh. How could he see that unless Joseph constantly was pointing out to Potiphar that it was Yahweh that did all of this? Potiphar did not have any kind of an understanding of Yahweh till Joseph got there. But Joseph was able to say, I can't do this and I can't do that, but I do this and I do that. It's all because I serve and submit myself to Yahweh. Amen. So then Joseph finds favor, approval. He's in good standing with Potiphar. So he finds favor in the eyes of Potiphar. Let's continue in chapter 39. We'll stay in the same chapter and we'll drop down to verse 20. So now he's in the prison after the incident with Potiphar's wife, and he's in the prison. And it says, then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the sovereign's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But Yahweh was with Joseph and extended kindness to him, and he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And the prison warden gave into the hand of Joseph all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whoever was done there was his doing. The prison warden did not look into any point that was under Joseph's hand because Yahweh was with him, and whatever he did, Yahweh made it to prosper. So again, Joseph was getting favor from the prison warden because he actually was getting favor from the Almighty. Because when he was walking in the approval of the Almighty and was in good standing with the Almighty, what do you expect happens when you're in good standing with the Almighty? You prosper. Yeah. You are blessed. How do you receive blessing? You're obedient. You're submissive to Him. You trust Him. You believe in Him, and you follow and obey. Let's continue. Chapter 47. Chapter 47 and verse 23. Chapter 47 and in verse 23. And Joseph said to the people, look, I bought you and your land today for Pharaoh. So this is okay. The famine has already happened. Joseph is now in charge. And people are willing to sell everything and anything to get seed and to get grain. Because they're starving. This is during the years of famine. And so here they are, and Joseph says to the people, look, I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh. Look, here is the seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall be that in the harvest you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 is your own, as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your households, and as food for your little ones. And they said, you have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the eyes of my master, and we shall become Pharaoh's servants. So he says, let us find favor in the eyes of my master. He says, you have saved us. Let us find favor in the eyes of my master. In other words, let us go do what you said so that we get approval and are in good standing with our master. See, doing what is instructed brings approval in the eyes of the one who did the instructing. And so we see that. By the way, the fifth thing is really interesting to me because when you go to redeem that which is not yours and belongs to Yahweh, aren't you supposed to give back 1/5 instead of 1/10? Well, now they have nothing, and the reason they have nothing is because they were disobedient in the first place, and they weren't submissive to Yahweh, and this was the people that were, so here's Joseph instructing them saying, because you were delivered and you were redeemed, in the redemption process, 1/5 is now required. Just kind of throw that in the back of your mind. It has nothing to do with today's teaching, just an idea that comes out of the verse. So here again, the phrase, interestingly enough, I know you're shocked, says, if I have found favor in your eyes. He says, look, let us find favor in the eyes of my master. So it's always favor in the eyes, something that someone can see you doing. If I have found favor by what you've seen me doing, if I have found favor in what you're witnessing, then please, show mercy to me, compassion on me, give me something, bless me with something. Let's continue now in chapter... the same chapter, we're going to drop down to verse 29. We're still in chapter 47, and drop down to verse 29. And the time for Yisrael to die drew near, and he called his son Joseph and said to him, now if I have found favor in your eyes, please put your hand under my thigh and show kindness and truth to me. Please do not bury me in Mitzrayim. But I shall lie with my fathers, and you shall take me up from Mitzrayim and bury me in the burial place. He said, I do as you have, and he says, I will do as you have said. And he said, swear to me, and he swore to him, and Yisrael bowed himself on the head of the bed. Now, so here's Yisrael, this is Yaakov, talking to his son Joseph and saying, look, if I have found compassion in your eyes, if I have found approval If I am in good standing with you. Now the Father's looking down to the Son and saying, look, if I have done things enough in my life that you have compassion and mercy because you approve, because I'm elevated in your eyes, you appreciate what I've been doing, please do this thing for me. Isn't that what we talk about with our looking for favor? Forget the word grace. Grace, we don't even know what it means. But the word favor, when we're looking for favor, we're saying, if I've done anything pleasing, if I've done anything that you like, can you find it in your heart to do this thing for me? That's how favor is being used here in the Tanakh, over and over and over again. Let's go to chapter 49. Well, this is in Bereshit, chapter 49. This is going to be our last verses in Bereshit, so we are going to finish Bereshit. Chapter 49, and we're going to go into a couple of verses into chapter 50. We're going to start in verse 33, the last verse of chapter 49. It says, and when Yaakov ended commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed and breathed his last breath and was gathered to his people. And now in chapter 50, and Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 days were completed for him, for so were completed the days of embalming. And the Mitzrites wept for him 70 days. Verse 4, and when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, if now I have found favor in your eyes. So now Joseph is going to Pharaoh and saying, look, if I have found approval and if I'm in good standing with you, if I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the hearing of the Pharaoh, saying. Okay, so Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh. This isn't even Pharaoh yet. He's speaking to those who will go to Pharaoh. He says, speak in the hearing of Pharaoh, saying, my father made me swear, saying, see, I am dying. Bury me in my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. And now please let me go up and bury my father and return. And Pharaoh responds and says, go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So again, you see the use of the phrase, if I have found favor in your eyes, please allow me this. Please bless me with this. Please approve so it's okay for me to do that. If I have found approval, if I have found good standing, if I have found to be meriting something in your eyes, worthy of something, oh, please, I used the word worthy in a teaching on grace. I'm going to be in big trouble. But isn't that what's going on here? Isn't he saying, look, if I have been found worthy of this request, that you feel I deserve something like that, you're willing and happy to bless me because you realize of what I've done for you, and vice versa in our relationship, if I found favor in your eyes? And so here Joseph is asking it of Pharaoh so that he can bury his father Yaakov as he had promised to do. Have we seen a consistency in just the 14 verses in the book of Bereshit of how this idea, this word chen, this idea of grace is actually being used? Let's continue now in the book of Shemot. There's only 3 in the book of Shemot, so let's go through those. We should get that done for today. Actually, we're going to read a whole chapter. Well, we'll try. Okay, Shemot chapter 3 and verse 15. Let's see how we'll go here. Chapter 3 and in verse 15 of Exodus. We're in Exodus chapter 3, 15. And Elohim said further to Moshe, thus you are to say to the children of Israel, Yahweh Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzchak, the Elohim of Yaakov, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance to all generations. Go, and you shall gather the elders of Israel together, and say to them, Yahweh, Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, of Yitzchak and Yaakov, appeared to me, saying. So this is the conversation that Moses is having with Yahweh before he goes to Egypt. He says, I have indeed visited you and seen what is done to you in Mitzrayim, and I say, I am bringing you up out of the affliction of the Mitzrayim to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, and the Amorite, the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite, so to a land flowing with milk and honey. And they shall listen to your voice, and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the sovereign of Mitzrayim, and you shall say to him, Yahweh, Elohim of the Hebrews, has met with us, and now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness to slaughter to Yahweh or Elohim. But I know that the sovereign of Mitzrayim is not going to let you go, not even by a strong hand. And I shall stretch out my hand and smite Mitzrayim with all my wonders, and I shall do in their midst. And after that he shall let you go. And I shall give this people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites, and it shall be that when you go, you shall not go empty-handed. But every woman shall ask from her neighbor and the stranger in her house objects of silver and objects of gold and garments, and you shall put them on your sons and your daughters and shall plunder the Mitzrites. So here we go. He says, I shall give this people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites. Now, by the way, did they deserve this favor? No. So this is unmerited. But is it unmerited? Why is he giving them favor? Because he promised Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Actually, he said to Abraham, he said, look, your children will be sojourners in a land not their own, and they'll be slaves. He says, but I will bring them out. I'll bring them out and they'll come out and, blessed. He says, I will bring them out. So there was something that somebody did to bring about this grace, this favor. It just wasn't necessarily the one receiving it. Remember I said that earlier? We've seen that example. Here's another example. The Israelites did not merit anything up to this point. And by the way, by the time they actually take the stuff and plunder the Mitzrites, they still have not done anything except live through the plagues. They've still not done a thing to merit anything. The only one doing anything at this point is Moses and Aaron going back and forth to Pharaoh. And so they didn't deserve anything. They hadn't earned anything. But yet it's not unmerited completely. It was promised to. This favor was merited because it was promised to. It was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let's continue and look in chapter 11 and verse 2, and we'll see how this actually gets fulfilled. Chapter 11 of Shemot in Exodus chapter 11 and in verse 2. It says, speak now in the hearing of the people, and that every man ask from his neighbor and every woman from her neighbor objects of silver and objects of gold. And Yahweh gave the people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites, and the man Moshe was great in the land of Mitzrayim in the eyes of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's servants in the eyes of the people. Now, he gave them favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites. What does that mean? He gave them to be in a position of approval in what they were doing. The Mitzrites were glad to give them this stuff. Please take this stuff so that we don't get cursed anymore, so you can just get out of here. We've suffered enough. So we're going to give you favor. We're going to not get in your way. We're just going to hand you over whatever you want. Isn't this kind of like what you see Yaakov doing with Esau? Also what Shechem is offering to Yaakov? Just what can I do? Anything to make this right, to get this curse. Because Shechem understood a curse was coming. He had done wrong. That's what happened here. The people are dealing with the Mitzrites, and the Mitzrites, the Egyptians, are like, take whatever you need. Just make this end. Make this stop. Our land has been destroyed. We've been decimated. We've lost our firstborn. Go to chapter 12 and in verse 35. Chapter 12 and in verse 35. And the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moshe, and they had asked from the Mitzrites objects of silver and objects of gold and garments, and Yahweh gave the people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites, so that they gave them what they asked, and they plundered the Mitzrites. So here we're seeing a second witness to what happened in chapter 11, and then they were instructed to do it, and here they are in chapter 12 doing it. And again, they were given favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites. Chapter 33. Let's go to Shemot chapter 33. Chapter 33. And now, when I said there was 3 references, there are 3 sections that we're going to read, but there's actually 9 references to favor. We already covered a bunch of them here in chapter 3. We covered a few, as well as chapter 11 and 12. And now we're going to go to chapter 33. Chapter 33 and in verse 12. And Moshe said to Yahweh, see, you are saying to me, bring up this people, but you have not made known to me whom you would send with me. Though you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my eyes. And now please, if I have found favor in your eyes, please show me your way. And let me know you, so that I can find favor in your eyes and consider that this nation is your people. And Yahweh said, my presence goes, and I shall give you rest. And he said to him, if your presence is not going, do not lead us up from here. For how then shall it be known that I have found favor in your eyes, I and your people, except you go with us? Then we shall be distinguished, I and your people, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth. Verse 17, Yahweh says to Moses, even this word you have spoken I shall do, for you have found favor in my eyes, and I know you by name. So let's follow this through. In verse 13, he says, if I have found favor in your eyes, please show me your way and let me know you so that I find favor in your eyes. He understood how to find favor and approval and to be in good standing in Yahweh's eyes. He said, look, you got to know him and you got to find his ways. You got to learn his ways. This is what brings favor in the eyes of Yahweh. Moses understood it. He says, look, let me know you. In other words, let me have a relationship with you, an intimate relationship with you, so that I can find favor in your eyes. And he also said, and please show me your way. Because I know if I do things your way, I will be in good standing with you. You will approve of me. Amen. And then he also then continues and says, look, if you go a different way and leave us and abandon us, then how will I or your people be known as your people? We can't go anywhere, do anything without you. Those are the right things to say. Yeah. And then Yahweh says, okay, I will do these things because you have found favor in my eyes. And I approve of what you said. I approve of how you handled this. So approval is a big part of favor. By the way, that wouldn't make sense for most people to have to do with grace because it's unmerited. You didn't deserve it. You didn't earn it. And it has nothing to do with approval. Well, most of the time that we're reading in the Tanakh, it has everything to do with approval. Even if it's not the person receiving it, it has to do with the person that was originally offered it, like when because of Abraham. Abraham was the one who found favor, and so these things were done for Israel in Egypt because of what was done because of Abraham, because of Yitzchak, because of Yaakov. And that's why we find even in the rest of the understanding of the Exodus, when they finally get to the mountain and they're getting the commandments, Yahweh makes it clear. He says, look, it's not because of your righteousness, it's because you guys are so wonderful that I'm doing all this. It's because I promised your forefathers. I promised Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Yep. And so but they found favor in his eyes. But the people Israel received the grace, so to speak. They received favor because the other ones were the ones that found favor in his eyes. So you can be the recipient of the favor, of the grace, of the approval, of the compassion, even if you're not the one that actually was finding favor in his eyes. But somebody did, and that's what's important. Let's continue in chapter 35. So we will get through, hopefully, this. Chapter 34. Let's go ahead and read through most of this chapter here. And Yahweh, we'll start in verse 1. Yahweh said to Moses, cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. I shall write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. And be ready in the morning. Then you shall come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself to me there on the top of the mountain. So we're dealing with the making of the second set of tablets. Moses had already broken the first set, remember? And let no man come up with you, and let no man be seen in all the mountains, and let not even the flock or the herd feed in the front of the mountain. He cut the 2 tablets of stone like the first ones, and Moses rose early in the morning and went up Mount Sinai as Yahweh commanded him, and he took 2 tablets of stone in his hand, and Yahweh came down in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name Yahweh, and Yahweh passed before him and proclaimed Yahweh, Yahweh, and El Compassionate, and showing favor, patient and great in kindness and truth, watching over kindness for thousands, forgiving crookedness and transgression and sin, but by no means leaving unpunished, visiting the crookedness of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the 3rd and the 4th generation. And Moses hurried and bowed himself toward the earth and did obeisance. Now, understand the way he used favor in verse 6. He said, I'm a compassionate El, I show favor, I'm patient. So when he used favor there, what type of favor was he talking about? Well, he was using goodwill. He was using a delay granted for payment of an obligation. In other words, giving you a chance to make things right. See, when you're under grace, the purpose of it is so that you make teshuvah and make things right. That's what a grace period is. When you have a bill to pay, and they give you a grace period to pay it, what is that really? It's simply giving you a period of time that you've been granted a delay in your obligation with the expectation that you will pay your obligation, that you'll make things right. So he says here, I'm a compassionate El, showing favor, patient, and full of great kindness and truth. What other words could he be meaning for favor there? Compassionate, and showing a friendly regard, showing kindness, This is all the things that he was doing there with that. But notice what he says, though. However, I by no means leave unpunished those who deserve punishment. So this favor that we're talking about in verse 6 certainly isn't wiping out any obligation that would have been covered in verse 7. So it's not just an unmerited favor or grace that wipes out sin or that wipes away all obligation or all of a sudden just, creates a perfect good standing between you and the Almighty without you doing what's obligated on you. Did you see that? You need to see that. You need to see that because he says the word favor in verse 6, and yet he still says, I'm still not going to let go unpunished those who need punishing. And by the way, punishment still is mercy, because sometimes your punishment is what you need to wake you up. It's the punishment that you need to get you on the right path. Because if he just appeased you or enabled you or entitled you, you would never get there. So he's not going to leave unpunished those who are transgression. He says, I forgive crookedness, transgression, and sin, but by no means leave unpunished. By the way, what is he saying when he says he forgives that stuff? If you go through the process. What's the process? Well, you have to repent of it. I can't forgive it unless you want to be forgiven. He says, but if you want to be forgiven, if you make teshuvah, if you repent, then I can forgive you. So then Moses does abeyance, and then we are in verse 9. He says, and now, this is Moses, and said, now I have found favor in your eyes, O Yahweh. This is Moses now talking. I pray, let Yahweh go on in our midst, even though we are a stiff-necked people, and forgive our crookedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. So now he sits there and goes, if I have found approval, compassion, if I have found to be good in good standing with you, I know we're stiff-necked people. I know we don't deserve this, but can you put favor in unmerited mercy and compassion on us because we would love to be your people? He says, forgive our crookedness and our sin, which has inherent in it the idea that it says he's going to repent, they're going to repent. He says, and says, forgive us our crookedness and our sin and take us as your inheritance. And he said, see, I am making a covenant. Before all your people, I am going to do wonders, as Yahweh speaking now, do wonders such as not have been done in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among whom you are shall see the work of Yahweh, and for what I am doing with you is awesome. Guard what I command you today. See, I am driving out from before you the Amorite, and the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Guard yourself lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you are going, lest it be a snare in your midst. But break down their altars and smash their pillars and cut down their asherim. For you do not bow yourselves to another mighty one, for Yahweh, whose name is jealous, is a jealous El. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they whore after their mighty ones and slaughter their mighty ones, and one of them invites you, and you eat of their slaughterings, and you take of his daughters, of your sons, and his daughters a whore after the mighty ones, and make your sons whore after their mighty ones. Didn't that happen? Didn't we need Pinchas to deal with that? He warned them not to do that right here. He says, do not make a molded mighty one for yourselves. Verse 18, guard the festival of unleavened bread. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you, in the appointed time of the month of Aviv, because in the month of Aviv you came out from the Mitzrayim. Everyone opening the womb is mine, and every male firstborn among your livestock, whether bull or sheep. But the firstborn of a donkey you ransom, and with a lamb, and if you do not ransom, then you shall break his neck. Every firstborn of your son shall you ransom. You shall not appear before me empty-handed. 6 days you work, but on the seventh day you rest. In plowing time and in harvest you rest. And perform the festival of weeks for yourself, of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the festival of ingathering at the turn of the year. 3 times in the year all your men are to appear before the Master Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. For I dispossess nations before you, and shall enlarge your borders, and let no one covet your land when you go up to appear before Yahweh your Elohim 3 times in the year. Do not offer the blood of my slaughtering with leaven, and do not let the slaughtering of the festival of Passover remain until morning. Bring the first of the first fruits of your land to the house of Yahweh your Elohim. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. And Yahweh said to Moses, write these words, for according to the mouth of these words I have made a covenant with all Israel, a covenant with you and Israel, And he was there with Yahweh 40 days and 40 nights. He did not eat bread. He did not drink water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 words. Now, for all the argument's sake, did he just write the 10 commandments on these tablets? Well, according to this verse, he wrote everything Yahweh just said. That included the feast days. It included offerings. It included all kinds of stuff. Now, we didn't read everything here that probably he said, but absolutely everything we read, he wrote on these tablets. So sure, the 10 words were on them, but so a lot of people will say, oh, well, we don't have to keep all that other stuff because that was outside the ark. Well, I don't know. This is the set of tablets that ended up in the ark. The other set were destroyed. This set of tablets has all the feasts mentioned on it and other things mentioned on it. And Yahweh said, he said, look, write these words, for according to the mouth of these words, I've made a covenant. What words? The words he just spoke. And he doesn't, by the way, list the 10 commandments in this particular section. He says, and he wrote the 10 words, the 10 commandments. And so that's a really interesting thing, because this is the set that goes in the ark. By the way, this is something the Adventists get all confused about, because the Adventists want to make it sound like the 10 commandments were in the ark and everything else was outside. Well, not according to Exodus chapter 34. Exodus 34 makes it clear that it was all written there. Okay, so these are big tablets with a lot of stuff written on them. Now, the 10 words may have been on the front, and maybe all the stuff was written on the back. Who knows how it was written out? I believe even the blueprints for the tabernacle were written on the tablets. And that he brought, because he said, look, follow the pattern that I give you on the mountain exactly in building the tabernacle. So the blueprints may have been written on there as well. So who knows how small the 10 words were written on those tablets. We see them as 2 tablets that barely fit 5 on each side, and etc. No, it may have taken up a tiny space on the tablets compared to everything else, to have room for everything else. But I wanted to read all of this for you because I wanted you to understand. He said, look, if now I have found favor in your eyes, O Yahweh, in verse 9, I pray let Yahweh go in our midst, even though we are stiff-necked people, and forgive our crookedness and our sin and take us as your inheritance. And Yahweh's response to that is, no problem, we'll do that, but I expect all of this to receive favor. I expect you to do all this stuff. So here we are with the 2 tablets, the 2 new tablets being made, and a listing of the feasts and the obligations are in there. He expects us to obedience. And by the way, there's an interesting verse. We didn't talk about this in a long time, but it is on the teaching on Shabbat, the remember the Sabbath day teaching. But in verse 21, it says, 6 days you work, but on the 7th day you rest. In plowing time and in harvest time you rest. Why does it mention that? Because it knows that people may have an excuse and say, you know what? It's harvest time. I can't afford to take a day off because this is our busy season. I need to work. Or it's planting time, and so it's plowing time, and I certainly can't take a day off. I got to plow and I got to plant. And he says, there is no excuse. You take the day rest, period, every 7 days, period. Let's continue. Actually, you know what? That's going to end it right there for us. We're going to pick up in the book of Numbers after that. Let's go before the Father. Father, we want to come before you, and we want to really understand grace. We want to understand what you mean by grace. We want to understand how it applies in our lives. We want to understand how to apply all these things, and we want to find favor in your eyes. We don't want just whatever the world has taught us. We don't want whatever we've learned all our lives. We want to hear from your mouth. And we know that the mouth that speaks, that your mouth when it speaks, it got written down by Moses, and we have the words on these papers. And as you spoke to the prophets, they wrote it down on these papers. As you spoke to the apostles, they wrote it down on these papers. And so, Father, we want to read and study and understand how you would have us to understand favor, grace, chen, so we understand what these things mean, and that we can understand it correctly. Because we want to find favor. We want to find approval. We want to be in good standing with you more than anything else we want. The one thing we want above all is to find favor in your eyes. So, Father, help us. Fill us more with your Spirit. Lead us and guide us through the teacher in us so that we can come into understanding of your word and so that we can find approval in your eyes. Because, Father, that's all we desire. So, Father, we submit ourselves to you now, seeking, asking, and knocking for the things that we're begging, show us what we need to do so that we might find favor in your eyes. And Father, we come to you and ask these things in the authority of your Son, our coming Mashiach, our high priest. It's in his authority that we come to you, seeking and asking and desiring. So in the name of Yeshua, we ask all these things as we come seeking favor in your eyes, and we all say, Amen, Amen.